about some Pittsburgh Steelers and all things Pittsburgh. Our guy Tim Benz. What's going on, buddy? How are you?
I'm doing all right. Trying to figure out who the next quarterback is going to be without Twitter working. So it's kind of chaotic around here.
Tim, you do such a great job there in Pittsburgh, and I've been on with you talking some Lightning and talking some Bucks over the years. So thanks so much for joining us right here. Yeah, I'm finding like ESPN.com, like they're posting these really archaic, like cryptic messages on there. Isn't it crazy like how things have changed over the years, where on a day like today, NFL free agency and Twitter goes down, everybody's like, well, I guess we kind of have to wait.
Yeah, it's almost like we're going back in time to a point where we're waiting for the afternoon edition newspapers.
Right.
Although we can't have afternoon and morning newspapers anymore because the tariffs are too high on newsprint ink coming in from Canada. So we're kind of screwed there too.
Yeah, damned if we do, damned if we don't, man. Let's go through. We'll get to the quarterback in a second. DK Metcalf going to the Steelers. I don't know if many people thought that was going to be a destination for the big-time wideout for Seattle. Did that news catch you by surprise at all? And what does that mean going forward, at least for that position for Mike Tomlin in that offense?
It didn't necessarily catch me by surprise because after the way things went last year when they got rid of Deontay Johnson without any sort of backup plan, you knew that they were going to have to ratchet up their efforts to make sure that didn't happen again in 2025. So with all the wide receivers that were moving around, with Christian Kirk and Devontae Adams and Cooper Kupp being rumored and Godwin and DK and every other name that they'd been previously associated with still apparently out there, it seemed. I thought they'd come away with somebody. I thought they would have at least one veteran wide receiver added to the team. I didn't think they'd swing this big on DK for that long, for that much money,
right,
especially before they decide to do whatever they decide to do with Pickens.
And do you think they'll keep him?
I wouldn't.
Yeah, right.
I wouldn't. I was on board with trading him before DK. I think this makes it all the easier to part with him now. I think depending on what they do at quarterback, look, the Steelers don't have a great track record of spreading the ball around and completing a lot of passes as it is.
Right.
So now you're trying to keep DK Metcalf and George Pickens happy. Good luck with that. So I think these are two pretty combustible, volatile guys. I want to see who wins the race for most face mask penalties against opposing defensive backs while a play is still going on. I've got the over-under at about 10.5 combined between the two of them. So I think it'd be a tough balancing act. And I think what you can do is, all right, you gave up a 2 to get DK. You could probably get a 2 for Pickens. Use that 2 then to either draft a rookie wide receiver in the second round, or you get a Buka from Ohio State potentially at 21, or some other first-round receiver, and then start addressing defensive line in the second round if you got your number 2 pick back.
Right. And it's funny, you look at those two guys and you're like, yeah, they're out there mixing it up. They could be like the tag team champions of the world, right? Just slap some WWE belts on those guys and they'll be doing some extracurricular activities. I don't know if Mike Tomlin would love that, but it sure as hell be entertaining. So I guess the next question, Tim, is who the hell's throwing these guys passes now? Right?
Well, I don't know what's happened in the 11 minutes since I kind of logged on here. So, again, without social media at my fingertips to give us answers, my first thought when I saw the DK move was they're not going to bring in a quarterback who's not proficient at throwing the football on top of a wide receiver that just spent $150 million on. Right. Like, I didn't see that. But then again, do they want to spend 35 on Darnold too? Is he worth that? Because if that's what it takes to get him away from Seattle. It also struck me that DK and Russ have a real good relationship. His wife, DK's girlfriend, are both pop stars. They know each other well, so there's a connection there. But Jerry Dulac, my co-host on Sports Talk in Pittsburgh on 970 Fox Sports Radio and in the Post-Gazette, he said that Russ is out, so maybe that's true. That doesn't make much sense to me. That's surprising to me. I thought he'd be at least in it to the end. But I don't know. I think my hunch would be Darnold makes the most sense right now. More sense than Rodgers, but apparently they're talking to Rodgers. I would love to see Rodgers come here after DK came here, because then for once and finally we could get away from absolving Tomlin of any and all blame, which I feel like everybody outside of Pittsburgh does because, well, he's never had a quarterback since Ben, or people act like Mike Tomlin doesn't have any say or agency in how the roster is built when he's actually the guy who's got his thumb on the roster more than anybody else. And I don't know why the national media outside of Pittsburgh doesn't want to accept that.
Yeah, I know it's something that you and I have been talking about for a while. It's like, everybody from the outside, they probably take Mike Tomlin as their head coach in a heartbeat, but there are some issues there from people internally in Pittsburgh going, yeah, okay, he's a great coach, but are we ever going to be able to get that next? Are we ever going to be able to take that next step and make deeper runs in the playoffs? Because you look at all the other talent in the AFC, they better get a good quarterback because it's going to be an uphill climb going against Lamar and Burrow and all these other guys.
Yeah, depending on what Cincinnati ends up doing, they could open up the season with Darnold or Rodgers with DK and still only have the third best team in the AFC.
Right.
Just because they might get somebody who's more proficient at throwing the football than Justin Fields, and they throw DK Metcalf in the mix, especially if they subtract Pickens at the same time, that doesn't mean they're going to be anything more than the 9 or 10 win team they've been since 2017.
Yeah, nobody wants mediocrity, right? You want to be able to kind of shoot for that's probably the worst thing. It's almost like the old Jeff Fisher years. Remember when the Titans just kept finishing 8-8? Like, nobody wants that, Tim. And
except he didn't have a Super Bowl, and Tomlin got a Super Bowl in his second year and then a trip in his fourth. So everybody kind of holds on to that. But if you look at his resume since the start of the 2012 season, after they lost to Tebow in Denver, then the 2011 season, we're talking about now 8 years without a single playoff victory. And in his entire career, he's had 2008, 2010. He's had 4 years of playoff victories. So, the facts tell a very different story than Tomlin's a great coach, period, end of sentence, the way the national media likes to portray it.
So, Tim, before I let you go, because I know there's a lot of free agency news, and you and I got to start perusing through these headlines and combing through.
Yeah, I'm looking. Some of your commenters are saying Godwin's back, huh?
Godwin is back. Hassan Reddick is back. But before I let you go, where you kind of mentioned a little bit before, but what's kind of the next step outside of the quarterback, outside of figuring out what it is with the wide receiver position? What would you say kind of to the people that are on the outside looking in? What are some of the big things that Mike Tomlin and this team needs to fix so they can start that climb back up through the hierarchy in the AFC?
Defensive line. It's a myth that the Steelers are great against the run and good running the football. They're actually not very good at either against good teams. And that was very clear by the time they played those 5 really solid teams in a row to end up losing out at the end of the season last year, including the playoff loss to Baltimore. They got to fix the defensive front, stopping the run. They got to get more creative in their pass rush. It can't just be Watt and Highsmith trying to beat guys off the edge every single play. They got to get more creative in how they create pressure. The cornerback, they need to add a cornerback. They need to figure out TJ's contract. If they really want to give him Max Crosby and Myles Garrett type of dollars for a second time,
right.
Make him the biggest contract for a non-quarterback for the second time now that Garrett has just done it. I wouldn't. I'd play out this year and then reevaluate after this season. They got to, get their young offensive linemen up to speed. They've got a good group of promising young offensive linemen, and Isaac Seumalo is a veteran. They got to get those guys from promising to good NFL players. They can't just be unmolded clay anymore. They got to perform. And then they got to figure out the running back position too, because with Najee Harris floating out there at this point, if they're going to be the running team that they want to be, it can't just be Jaylen Warren, who's a restricted free agent that they decided to tender today. They got to add a breakaway piece, somebody that can actually get to the edge. If Arthur Smith wants to run these pitch plays all the time to the outside, they better find somebody who can actually get outside the tackle.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of Arthur Smith down here in Tampa when he was with Atlanta. Tim Benz PGH on Twitter /X, whenever the hell it's going to come back up. He does everything up there in Pittsburgh. Tune into him. He does such a phenomenal job. Tim, thanks, buddy. I know it's a busy day. Let's get back and talk some hockey next time, brother.
You got it, man. All the best to you.
Thanks, pal.